The farming model of community-supported agriculture, often referred to as CSA, developed simultaneously in many places at once. It has its roots in biodynamic agriculture, which goes back to the 1920s, and in organic farming and voluntary collective farms, which stretch back to the very origins of society. However, what we recognize as the modern CSA began to sprout during the 1960s and 70s in Alabama, Japan, Switzerland, and Germany. One of the earliest CSA-like models was born right here in the American South. Booker T. Whatley was a professor at Tuskegee University in the 1960s when he began work on the Whatley Diversified Plan for Small Farms. Clients would join a membership club and pick their own produce at 40% of what they pay at the supermarket. Meanwhile, in Japan in 1971, warnings about the dangers of chemical agents in food production sparked a movement for organic agriculture. Farmers and consumers formed cooperative arrangements called takai, or partnerships, which remain popular in Japan today. And in Switzerland in 1978, workers and farmers started an operation called Les Jardins de Cocagne. Its goal was to build a relationship between eaters and growers so that the eaters knew where their food was coming from, and the growers weren't oppressed by a supermarket system that didn't provide them enough revenue. Around this same time, German farmer Peter Berg came up with the idea of box schemes, a way for consumers to get a box of biodynamic vegetables delivered to them every week. Inspired by these ideas from Europe, Robin Van Inn and a group of farmers in Massachusetts formed Indian Line Farm in the 1980s, while in neighboring New Hampshire, Traeger Grow and his wife Alice founded Temple Wilton Community Farm. These two farming communities shared ideas with each other and initiated the first growing season for CSAs in America in 1986. Through the 1980s and 90s, the idea of CSAs spread. In the new millennium, the movement has blossomed. Today, we're visiting two CSA organizations in our own neck of the woods, Project Grows in Verona, Virginia, and Dreaming Out Loud, based out of Washington, D.C. and working with farms in Northern Virginia. Let's see how they're advancing the vision of community-supported agriculture. This is one plant I'm not familiar with.
This is comfrey.
Comfrey.
It has a deep taproot, so it's a dynamic accumulator, so it draws up nutrients, stores it in its leaves, and then we'll use it to mulch fruit trees or other parts of the farm. And then it grows back so quickly you can keep cutting it and using it all over. Our mission is to improve the health of children and youth in our service area, which is Augusta County, Stanton, and Waynesboro. And we're doing that through many different ways. The farm is kind of the piece that connects all of the different things that we're doing in the community. So we're working on food access and food education, and the produce that we grow here is used in a lot of the programming that we do both on the farm and in the schools. The farm is one component of the work that we do as an organization.
Project Grows was formed in response to the results of a community health needs assessment undertaken by Augusta Health that found exceptionally high rates of childhood obesity and diabetes, juvenile diabetes, here in our community. 9 different community organizations came together to address that need, and what emerged from that conversation was the idea of an educational farm focused on promoting food access.
When we're working with kids, we're getting them out here so they can see firsthand the food that they're eating, learn about, how it grows and get their hands in the dirt and really make that connection. We're all eating, so yeah, especially kids, if you can get them, interested and involved at a young age, then that sort of continues throughout a lifetime and just sort of piques that curiosity.
Let's say you were in front of a class of 6th graders and you were trying to explain the concept of a CSA or community supported agriculture?
Usually I would describe a CSA as like a vegetable subscription. So most folks are pretty familiar with different subscription programs that are out there these days. And a CSA is basically just a vegetable subscription. You pay up front for the whole season's worth of vegetables. Short and stubby though could also be the soil.
Yeah, and we did experience that up at the very top of the beds.
Yeah, but overall I'd say they look great. Our CSA is 20 weeks long. The first week of our CSA is the first week in June. And then you receive a share of what we're harvesting every week for the whole growing season. So from the beginning of June until the end of October.
When you have folks who are dedicated for a whole season, who get to know you and who you get to know, especially in a drop-off service where you chit-chat here and there, I think it really helps build community buy-in. How many extra cukes do you want? You can have a lot.
So how do you, with this cucumber, how many do you think I should?
They give you recipes that merge many of the vegetables or herbs that you get, so it's just not, this is how you cook a tomato.
I'm really excited about green beans coming on because there's so many different ways to eat them, that can just change their flavor completely. At our staff lunch table, we're always talking about what we're eating and, what we're gonna make with this or that or whatever. So I think by nature, we all really love to talk about food.
It kind of perks you and makes you want to cook better, want to cook more healthy.
Cucumbers and then an onion and then put mayonnaise, sugar, white vinegar.
Oh yeah.
And then I got one now for squash.
At a farmer's market, customers, they don't have anything to risk. They walk up, they make the purchase, and they leave. When you subscribe to a CSA, you're in it.
I mean, you do get some of that at the farmer's market too with returning customers, but but you're right, it's not for an entire season. And one of the strong benefits for farmers with CSAs is that it's upfront cash, it's upfront buy-in to help you start the season, to buy your seeds, to buy your inputs, to buy supplies. And it really ensures, I think, a more productive season.
What we're seeing here is a lot of technology. Row covers, drip irrigation. I'm seeing a lot of different creative and innovative ways that a generation ago farmers didn't use those methods in their what they called a market garden.
Right. Row cover is like our first barrier in the spring to lower colder temperatures. It's also a means to mitigate disease pressure and pest pressure. It's an investment, but it's an interesting barrier that lets respiration function and let moderate amounts of moisture in. And it's usually used, say, in cucurbits right now until they blossom to really help the plant thrive with lower disease pressure, because we're not using sprays and synthetics and pesticides here. We're really trying to promote healthy disease responsive action of the plants, first by the soil structure and then using the row cover to mitigate some of that stress and pressure until the point where we need pollinators to come in, and then we kind of let it loose.
When people hear the word food desert, they're not thinking about a place like Augusta County. But even though it's a huge agricultural area, there is a big disconnect there, and a lot of folks do have difficulty with access.
A big piece of what we do are the markets that we manage. And at those markets, we not only accept SNAP and WIC, but we also double SNAP benefits there with funding support from Virginia Fresh Match. That is great for consumers, but it's also great for farmers. This is probably Hercules. I mean, look at how, like sturdy Greek hero.
Yeah, I'd have to look at our note to remember. One of the big benefits, I think, to small farming is that connection that you have to where your food is coming from, which I think is really important. It sort of drives your purchasing, and it supports local economies. So I think that even if this kind of farming that we're doing isn't necessarily going to completely feed the world, I think it's still really important. We do have funding that's coming in from other sources, so we are partially grant funded and we're partially funded by members of the community, donors. So, you know, we're able to use the money that comes in through the farm, we're able to put that back into the farm to support the programming that we're doing. So is very different than, you know, a small family farm where you would just have that one source of income coming into the farm from the sales that you're making.
We're in Washington, D.C., specifically in Ward 8. So our farm is located behind Kelly Miller Middle School, and our CSA pickup is also here at Kelly Miller Middle School. I was living in Anacostia and had really limited access to healthy food. Once I learned about the model, you know, I was like, oh, we need something like this east of the river. We need our own CSA.
We just first started out wanting to make a difference in the lives of young people here in the district. We saw that there was a real urgent need and that there were deeper issues behind the scenes that which caused the lack of access to healthy food and lack of economic opportunity in our communities.
Ward 7 and Ward 8, there's a deficit of grocery stores, meaning for every 50,000 people, there's one grocery store. If you go over to a neighborhood in Ward 1, for every 8,000 people, that's a grocery store. And that's not lack of wanting a grocery store, that's not a disinterest in vegetables.
We use the term food apartheid because we feel that it's something that's really systematic. Food desert, I think, is kind of the more mainstream term that people know.
Yeah. That one has a lot of pieces.
It's not a desert. There's food here, but it's not quality food and it's not food that's healthy.
I want some more. I want candy.
It's 2020, the 401st anniversary of Black people being brought to this country to start and fuel the food system and the agricultural system and the economic system. The folks that built the food system were not compensated for their labor.
In this area in Washington, D.C., across the region, white wealth is 81 times that of Black wealth. Our food apartheid, this current construction, is the result of that racial wealth gap. It's the denial of the ability to build wealth and invest in ourselves.
We're in an urban area, we're in D.C. It's a neighborhood that has been redlined, meaning that the government participated in making sure people either didn't get loans or didn't get funding to improve their communities, to improve their own homes.
We really work here to have this space, to give an example of what can be done in an urban area, but also to call awareness to the issues that we have to do this and we have to set up these markets and things on our own because we're not getting support to feed our communities in the way that people need to be fed.
We're rooted in systemic change and we want to get at root causes. Dreaming Out Loud went about finding different ways to plug into the food system. We started out running farmers markets and we looked around the country about trying to find who was implementing best practices and innovative things, from folks like Farm Fresh Rhode Island that became a food hub from a farmers market. Different innovative ways that people were growing food and aggregating food and processing food, and started thinking about ways we could synchronize that in communities where you might have community assets like churches or empty lots where you could turn things into farms or food hubs and make them productive spaces that serve the needs of the community and bring other farmers and producers and food makers together around those issues.
It was Chris's vision to use this as a launch pad. We'd say farm and food hub. So in as much as we love growing here, we acknowledge that there's a limitation of what you can grow on 2 acres.
We are the food and farm hub at Kelly Miller. Our food hub team, they work to aggregate produce from farmers, in the DMV region.
We've had long-standing connections with farmers across the spectrum in Virginia. Crazy Farm, first-generation Mexican-American family-owned farm. The Izaguirre family was the first folks to come out to our farmers markets here in Ward 7. We also work with Sylvan Aqua Farms, Browntown Farms, lots of great Virginia farms.
And that allows us here to just grow a select amount of crops and not have to do, a huge diversified farm.
2 acres sounds like a lot when you're in the city. Rural farmers are laughing like we have 2 acres of single crops. I like to grow pole beans and things that would grow up, cucumbers, because we had a very tiny space, and so using that vertical area was really important. Now that we're in more space, we're still, looking to use some of those techniques so we can grow as much as possible.
Kale, collards, Swiss chard, lettuce, watermelons, cantaloupe, sweet potatoes, a variety of peppers. The soil quality here is not the best, and so that's something that we've really had to work on the past 3 years that we've been here. After the first year, I really narrowed down the crops that I found did well.
Yeah, you ain't gotta turn it like that. You get up on the wheel, it's easy.
We want to grow things that are indeterminate, high turnover, so we can get the most out of what, we have to work with.
This is our third growing season here. We've implemented a lot of cover cropping and a lot of no-till into our farming practices. And we've seen an increase in our worms and just the richness of our soil. And so that has allowed us to expand what we offer.
We're in the Mid-Atlantic, so what can grow here is the first framework. I talked to the farm manager. We've both been farming for quite a while, and we talk about what can grow here. What do the soil tests say? And then a deciding factor is, what does the community want? What have they been asking for? What is a part of our cultural pantry? And how can we provide that? We are approached all the time from community groups, neighbors that want to start a CSA, that want to start a farm. That's part of our model. We do assist people in sort of that initial goal. So you want to start a farmer's market? Well, 11 out of 12 of ours are run by community groups that came to us saying, I want to start a farmer's market.
We are going to work to empower ourselves, but then also advocate for the things that we need within our community so that we can do this and we can do it on a larger scale, and we have the infrastructure and the land that we need to be able to grow food for our community.
Beautiful. Oh, that was just impromptu. We was checking it out. Oh, really? Yeah, this freestyling.
The primary focus of this is a gathering space, an education space for those young folks going to school. The degree to which they can buy food is important to us, but then also saying that it's not their fault, that there is something larger going on, is important to us as well. Today's our first ever drum circle led by Mr. Hill, a longtime Ward 7 resident and a community leader who's known for blending his activism and his passion for growing food.
We're just trying to bring positive energy and concepts to the earth, period.
You don't even got a ration. Freedom of the mind of the children is the passion, education is the goal.
It's sort of like a connection with what we call civic ecology. People who did not know each other, prior to circumstances like this farm.
Give a man a fish and he's eating for the evening. Teach a man a fish, he's eating for eternity. Eating for eternity. Eating for eternity.
They come here, they meet, and they really share their experiences, and they become like an extended family.
People come here and they feel happy when they leave and when they're here. They have the opportunity to try things that they've maybe never done before.
I always wanted to get into gardening, but I never had the opportunity till I met Dreaming Out Loud. So when I met Dreaming Out Loud and came out here and started getting in the ground, getting dirty, I haven't looked back since.
It's easy when you're farming to sort of just be in the daily grind of the harvest season, but then we have these bursts of energy when we have kids come out here for a field trip, or we have volunteer groups come out, and it really just reminds you why we're doing this work and who's going to eat these vegetables. Everyone has to eat, and so as we're growing this produce out here, we're really working to make connections between the food that we're growing and the people in the community.
You reap the benefits and you reap the risks and the rewards of farming by supporting CSAs, so that no matter what is happening in the world. There's a shared risk there and there's a shared reward.
We saw this year with COVID a huge increase in the interest in our CSA. So I think people were really looking locally to find some sense of security when, like on a global scale, things felt really uncertain. When you have really diversified local agriculture, we can sort of step in those times where, people aren't sure if they're going to be able to get whatever the particular item is. So I think that, being able to rely on your local community and your local economy does provide some security during those times.
We face a lot of challenges, but what gives me hope is to be able to have spaces like this where even amidst the pandemic, we can find Black joy and we can find solace in our history and in our resilience. Just to see folks come together around the space that seemed to be empty and then make something productive out of it together, it allows you to form a bond and trust to move things forward in other spaces and have conversations around community issues.
I really believe that it's important for people to have an understanding about how their food is grown and where it's grown. The beauty of it is just like the community that is forming around it, recognizing that it's a welcoming space and an open space.
The soil is transformative. It binds people, it brings people together. We want to use the food system as a lens through which we view the change that is needed at the policy level that not only dials down into the food system, but it really rises up and then sweeps across the broad spectrum of American life.
Agriculture brought humanity into the modern era, and our relationship with farming has been evolving ever since. Community-supported agriculture is an important step forward on this continuing journey. With so many thoughtful and innovative people teaming together to feed our communities, it's an exciting time to be involved in Virginia farming.